Was that a provocative title? You bet it was. But the title is accurate. What you're seeing next to my head is a picture of a vegan ribeye steak. I live in the great state of Oklahoma, and I guarantee you, the great state of Oklahoma objects to this monstrosity. Since that cut of steak is our official steak of the state of Oklahoma, quit co opting our culture, please. But most seriously, though, I have to ask a rather basic question. What in the world reason could there be for people who advocate a way of eating that is supposed to be healthy? Why would they promote absolutely artificial, highly processed Franken foods like this? Disregard the fact that this thing doesn't even look like a real steak at all. I mean, if I got a steak that looked like that at a restaurant, I'd be pretty upset, to be honest with you. I mean, the thing's just a coagulated hunk of plant byproducts mashed together into a vaguely steak shaped object that you're then expected to eat and enjoy. But let's find out what the real deal is here, because there's a lot behind this stuff. So, again, as we like to do, we go to opposition news. For this case, veg news. We get this headline: the former meat company is now making vegan ribeye steak because it's more sustainable. Urbani Foods is launching Steak, a marbled vegan ribeye steak that taps into a new category of sustainable plant-based meat that replicates conventional whole cuts. Okay, Urbani, if you want real sustainable foods, ditch the vegan processed foods. They're not sustainable. Regenerative agriculture is sustainable. Join the regenerative agricultural revolution. You used to be a meat company. You know this. I mean, look, your hearts look like they're in the right place, but this is seriously misguided. From the article, quote, this fall, Vancouver-based food company Urbani Foods is launching a hyper-realistic vegan ribeye steak under the brand Steak. Initially, Steak will be available at specialty stores and high-end restaurants. The launch comes after 2 years of intensive research and development into a whole muscle vegan meat that mimics the marbling and texture of a premium butcher shop style steak. Can't make this up, folks. You really, really can't. Made from a blend of soy and wheat proteins, of course, and spices, Steak aims to bring a plant-based steak experience to the center of consumers' plates with a juicy and tender ribeye-style steak that has a dry-aged texture traditionally found in conventional meat offerings. End quote. Wow, folks, this is reality. When I showed this to my wife yesterday, she laughed and couldn't believe that they were calling this Franken food product Steak. At least there's some truth in advertising here, because this is a grotesque mistake. Are you surprised that this product is soy-based and wheat-based? Do you find it odd that at a time when most agriculture forecasts show a shortage of soy and wheat and animal feed-related things coming for soon in this fall harvest, or you find it odd that they'd be launching a new soy and wheat product? I find that kind of odd, but like the title says, this thing is an abomination. There's no reason for a vegan to want to eat something that looks like meat. Those meat alternatives are for that period where you are moving from some variation of the standard American diet to veganism. That's what they're for. But most vegans I met who were fairly serious about it hated those meat substitutes and thought people should spend as little time as possible in a place where they are made more comfortable eating that kind of junk because they thought they were junk. But the problem for them is that most of them don't spend a little time there. They spend a lot of time eating that stuff. And I don't personally care what other people eat. I'm more worried that this stuff is going to be replaced meat in the grocery stores already, given what the elites are telling us openly about their plans to inflict this on the rest of everyone. They're not hiding this, folks. They're very out and open about this. Some of them saying they want to wage lawfare to bankrupt the cattle industry. But here's proof that this company is aiming beyond the vegan market with shortages looming. From the same article, quote, following several years of success with its soy-based Noble jerky, Urbani co-founder Stefan Urbani says the company decided to launch a vegan steak because it's an ideal product that comes to mind when people think of beef. We wanted to show that plant-based alternatives can be more than just ground particle-style products like burgers and sausages, Urbani told Veg News. Technically, whole muscle meats are harder to replicate, but they open up an entirely new area of plant-based products. A scary world we're living in. In addition to coming up with a unique product, Urbani aimed to satisfy the palate of traditional adult audience. Most of the existing plant-based offerings seem like they are targeted to 10-year-old kids. Nuggets, burgers, tenders, Urbani said. Mistake will be a plant-based alternative targeted to a more adult audience that occasionally eats a meal at a table with a plate and cutlery. End quote. If he sounds a little condescending there, he does, but he's also missing the fact that a lot of adults eat chicken nuggets. That's a reality. And there's a lot more to that story than that. The company apparently has a huge line of salami and sausages and ground meats. They're not the first aiming to replace whole cuts of meat either. Beyond and Impossible and others are aiming to create steaks themselves and probably even beef ribs and brisket, as if the barbecue community wants to throw a soy wheat loaf onto their offset grills. Look, this is beyond silly, and it begs a very serious question. Why? Why do this? Why not make a few products and then aim for, I don't know, nutritious vegan options that vegans might actually want? And no, I don't think vegan food is nutritious, since most of the nutrients in vegan foods are not bioavailable, but the typical vegan certainly does think that. So why not make nutritious options that will appease them? But nutrition doesn't have anything to do with this, and the environment has very little to do with this either. Headline from The Guardian, about as mainstream an outlet as you'll get. The most damaging farm products? Organic pasture-fed beef and lamb. Get ready for some pure propaganda, folks. From the article, quote, what are the world's most damaging farm products? You might be amazed by the answer. Organic pasture-fed beef and lamb. I realize this is a shocking claim. Of all the statements in my new book, Regenesis, it has triggered the greatest rage. But I'm not trying to wind people up. I'm trying to represent the facts. Let me explain. Arable crops, some of which are fed to farm animals, occupy 12% of the planet's land surface, but far more land, 28%, is used for grazing. In other words, pasture-fed meat and milk. Yet across this vast area, farm animals that are entirely pasture-fed produce just 1% of the world's protein. Livestock farmers often claim that their grazing systems mimic nature. If so, the mimicry is a crude caricature. A review of evidence from over 100 studies found that when livestock are removed from the land, the abundance and diversity of almost all groups of wild animals increases. The only category in which numbers fall when grazing by cattle or sheep ceases are those that eat dung. Where there are cattle, there are fewer wild mammals, birds, reptiles, and insects on the land, and fewer fish in the rivers. Perhaps most importantly, because of their crucial role in regulating living systems, there tend to be no large predators. End quote. This is a hit piece against regenerative agriculture, folks, because regenerative agriculture is catching on. That's why this article is nonsense for all the usual reasons, honestly. We know that the vast majority of the land used for animal agriculture isn't arable, meaning you can't grow food crops on them, not in any real amounts anyway. We know for a fact that regenerative agricultural practices can be used to restore cropland that has been functionally destroyed by decades of just silly monoculture. Our ancestors knew better about how to grow crops than we do, apparently. But that doesn't matter to the activists pushing you to stop eating a proper human diet. They don't care, and they're perfectly willing to mislead the average person to get them to adopt their ideology, or at the very least to submit to them when they use raw political power to get what they want out of you. Look, most of us don't care what vegans eat as long as they don't really try to force it on the rest of us. I really don't care what other people who are not in our community eat, but they're not willing to reciprocate. And that's kind of the crux of the problem. And I'm not trying to paint a broad brush here for every vegan. Not every vegan is militant like this. We see this fully, though, with the anti-regenerative framing part of this article. Brace yourself from some of the most just silly propaganda you'll have heard on this. Quote, even if we manage to ignore this crucial ecological issue, there's still a massive problem. Many livestock farmers now claim to practice quote-unquote regenerative grazing. The minimum definition of ecological regeneration is permitting trees to return to formerly wooded lands. In the uplands of Britain, to judge by the experience of deer managers, this means about a maximum of about one sheep for every 20 hectares or 50 acres. They might as well not be kept at all. In the lowlands, the NEP Rewilding Project in Sussex shows how far production has to fall to permit the return of trees and other wildlife. It generates just 54 kilograms of meat a hectare, as if chefs and foodies and some environmentalists propose meat were to come only from regenerative farms, it would be so scarce, only millionaires would be able to eat it. They're really hitting you in the feels here, aren't they? In reality, the great majority of regenerative pasture-fed meat is nothing of the kind. It's rebranded ranching, arguably the most destructive industry on earth. Have you ever seen a strip mine? Come on. In the US, livestock grazing is the primary reason for land degradation. It has caused an invasive species called cheatgrass to sweep across North America, devastating ecosystems. Cattle fencing excludes wild herbivores and stops migration. The supposedly greener methods some ranchers call holistic management. Okay, I'm going to cut here for a second. I'm going to stop here for a second. You see where they're going with this. Remember what I said, they're planning to use lawfare to bankrupt ranching. Anyway, continuing. Or planned grazing are just as bad for wildlife as conventional ranching. End quote. They are right about only one thing here. Under current practices and the absurd government standards, regenerative meat is out of the price range of most people. That is true, but that can be easily changed through political action. It will take time, of course, but it can be changed. But they don't want the competition, so instead they use political action to push their plant-based program that they want to force upon the rest of us. Regenerative agriculture is the future. It's not this abomination of fake ribeye steak, and certainly not this misanthropic plant-based program that they're so desperately trying to push on the rest of us. But I'm curious what you think is going on here with this. Is this something being directed by high-profile investors who advocate everyone go meatless? Is it something more insidious than that? Because I know a lot of you say that in the comments. I'm curious if you think that. Or is this just done by people who can afford to buy media influence that the rest of us simply can't afford so they can make a buck? Would you try that so-called ribeye? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Share this on social media if you can. That helps a lot. And as always, thanks for watching today.